do? What are your thoughts on it?
It's okay for me.
It's fine.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you believe that it's a human life?
No.
No. So when do you believe that it becomes a human life? Saad,
Well,
can you turn that image around?
Even if it's a life, when you don't want it, you don't want it.
Even if it's a human life?
It's considered murdering, but I'm for it.
So it's considered murdering, but you're for it?
Yeah. I mean, when you don't want it, you don't want it.
So would the same thing... What's your name, by the way? My name's Arnold. Now, would the same thing apply to an infant?
Same thing applied to us too. So.
To an infant. So if I don't want my child as a parent, do I have the right to choose to murder my child? My 1-year-old child?
You do have the right.
I have the right?
Yes, of course. It's your own.
Not just meaning I have the choice, because everyone makes choices, but do I have the right? Meaning, could I, if I wanted to, kill my child? Would it be the right decision to make?
I think you could, yeah, that's my opinion.
And it would be the right decision to make?
I think when you don't want the child, once you live in poverty and you don't have any money to raise your child, what are you gonna do?
That's wicked. That's evil.
That's my personal opinion.
You know what God says? God says that...
I don't believe it.
Well, you may not believe in it, but a belief is simply a proposition that may or may not be true. So the way that we test it is to see which beliefs correspond to reality for it to be true. And so you may not believe in it, but that's because God, you already know the God that has revealed to you, the God of Scripture, but you choose to suppress it, and that's evident by the way that you live your life. You live as a moral creature, right? If I was to harm you, would you say anything? If I was to harm you, would you say anything? Would you say that is unjust, that is wrong?
Well, there's no justice in this world.
Well, so if I was to harm him...
The world is not fair, right?
Okay, so if I was to rape a child, would you say that is wrong?
To me, it's wrong.
Well, would you say that it is objectively wrong? Because if there is no there's no subjective morality, and here's why. Because if we're removing God from the equation and we're just saying we're simply chemicals in motion, that there's only a physical aspect to Nodic and to Arnold, then there really is no way of determining what is right and what is wrong.
Yeah, there's no way of determining what is wrong.
So
whatever you think is right and wrong, that's what it is.
So would you agree with this, and would this make sense? That the rapist who goes and kills and rapes and molests the child is only doing so because of the chemicals in his brain that is forcing him to behave a certain way.
It's a chemical imbalance. Yeah, he was born like that.
So if that's the case, then why would you even say that it's wrong?
To me, it's wrong, because I think it's wrong. Maybe to some guy who's doing it, he thinks that's the right thing to do. So.
Let me give you an example of what that seems. You take 2 soda cans, right?
Yes.
You shake them, and then one fizzes left, the other fizzes right. Okay. Is one of them fizzing correctly and the other one fizzing incorrectly? No. It is no different with the child molester, if given your worldview is true. Because if all we are is just physical processes, it is no different than the soda pop, because what you're doing is you're factoring a variable, right? Mm-hmm. You're shaking it, and then it is causing it to determine, it's causing it to fizz a certain way. No different than the child molester or the rapist. Mm-hmm. The fizz in his brain, the chemicals in his brain, is predetermining him to molest that child. Mm-hmm. And so in the same way that you would look at the fizz and say there's nothing wrong with that, there's no right and wrong, is the same way you would have to look at the child molester, the rape, and say that there's nothing wrong with that.
I mean, I determined abortion is not wrong, so that's what I...
Here's where the inconsistency is, because we know, and you've even admitted that it's wrong to rape another individual. We know that innately.
I don't know about you, but to me it's wrong.
Yeah. Well, what I say is that it's objective because it's not just to you, because within your worldview, there would have been no morality at all. Meaning, you would have had no standard to say that is wrong to you.
But everyone determines the standards by himself, right?
Okay, so well, not necessarily. So how would you determine that to be wrong?
The raping?
Yeah.
To me, it's wrong. You go and rape a defenseless.
I know, but why? My question is why, and by what standard?
That's called abusing in my dictionary.
So why is abusing wrong?
Why is wrong? Because you're harming someone. You're causing pain.
Why is causing pain?
Because if someone does it to me, I'm gonna feel bad.
So why is causing pain wrong? By what standard can you say that causing another individual harm is wrong?
Because if that individual comes and does the same thing to me, I'm gonna I'm gonna be in pain.
You're gonna be
upset.
angry. See, here's the inconsistency and the arbitrariness. You still haven't given any reason as to why it is wrong. You're just saying that I don't want to be harmed myself.
That's wrong because I don't want to be harmed too.
You know what Jesus said?
What's that?
Love your neighbor as yourself. I agree with you. I think the reason that it's harm is the reason that it's wrong is because it's harming another individual. But that's something that we know innately, right? That's something that is within us.
Some people they don't.
Well, I think everyone does. Everyone, see, what it is the way that God created you, Nanak, as well as myself, is He created us in His image, with a conscience, and the works of the law, meaning an innate moral compass that we can know right from wrong. So our conscience is telling us that, we ought to love one another as ourselves. In the same way that you want to be treated, just like you said, you don't want to be harmed, is the same reason you don't want to go harm someone else. Which, by the way, is completely contrary to your view on abortion, because it does harm another human life.
On that, I mean, once you don't want it, you don't want it. Regardless you're harming or not harming someone, you don't. That's
See,
about it. I know it's contradicting, but that's my personal opinion. Yeah, I know.
But opinion.
But you can't. I mean, I can't change your opinion. You cannot. But you can't change my opinion.
Do you think
I know it's contradicting.
Do you think our opinions and our beliefs should be rational?
I mean, sometimes.
Do you think being contradictory is rational?
I mean, it's rational with that doing that.
Contradictory is rational.
It is.
Well, there's laws that we abide by, right? How do you know something is rational or not?
It's defined by law,
By laws, the laws of logic.
People gather around and they define something.
So the law of non-contradictory, as well as other fallacies, are irrational arguments, are irrational reasoning.
Yeah.
And so we shouldn't base our beliefs on that. Now, the reason that you do is because, again, it's an issue of sin. That sin affects our heart to the degree, and our mind, that it distorts our thinking. That for although you know God exists, you still choose to suppress it.
I don't know if it exists. Do you know if it exists or not?
Absolutely. All human beings know for certainty that they exist.
I can't say if it exists or not.
Not that you would profess it, meaning not that you would say it, but that you know it. You act as though He does.
I do not act as someone is existing and someone is telling me what to do.
Not someone is telling you what to do, but that I'll give you an example. You act as a moral creature, right? You know that there's right and wrong, because given your worldview, there would have been no right and wrong. And so you know that there's right and wrong. And you have an innate moral compass where you can say, you know what, I don't want to be harmed, therefore I don't want to harm that individual.
Yes, that's my point of view.
You function as a reasonable creature, right? You know that there's laws of logic that we need to abide by. You function relying on your senses. That when you're looking at me, you're not assuming you're talking to a tree, are you?
No.
You're assuming that there's a human being in front of you. You're relying, you're trusting on your sight.
Absolutely.
Same thing with your memory. The words that you're speaking, for example, you trust that they have the same meaning they did 5 minutes ago. That's why you're able to make out what I'm saying to you, because you're assuming past definition of those words. And so you're functioning with intelligibility. But the problem is that only God can account for that. When you remove God from the equation, you cannot make sense of why you would rely on your senses. You cannot make sense.
Evolution.
Well, evolution doesn't give you a right. Meaning it is not a basis.
We're talking about a right, or we're talking about the human creature?
We're talking about how we function with intelligibility. So here's what it is. Our brain what?
Our brain tells us what to do and we do that.
Yeah, that's what.
If you remove your brain, that's it. You're nothing.
Well, that's what you're being taught. But my question is, how do you know that you can trust your senses? Meaning, when you're looking at me, that is just one example. When you're looking at me, given your worldview, your naturalistic, evolutionary worldview, how do you know that you can trust what you're seeing right now?
Well, I've been living for 25 years, and whatever I've seen, that's reality for me, and I follow accordingly. So it works.
It works, but it's
been working.
That's problematic, because what it is begging the questions. It's fallacious reasoning.
Yeah.
You're saying that I can trust my senses now because I have been trusting it in the past. So you're relying on your perception to say that your perception is reliable. Does that make sense?
Everyone's perception is reliable.
I agree, but the only reason that we know that it's reliable is because God is the one that has created us such that we have senses that are reliable.
I studied before. I don't know if it exists or not, but if it exists, I don't believe in it.
I know.
Bigger problem. So
I know, and that's what it essentially comes down to. That for even though He exists, and we know He exists, we live our lives as though He exists.
I do not.
Well, you live your life in this sense. Not that you actually follow Him. Not in that sense. In the sense that you live your life in a world that He has created, and in a way that He has created you to be a moral creature to know that there is right and wrong, to be a reasonable creature, to know that we need to stay within the confines of the laws of logic, and etc. To know that you can rely on your senses, to know that you can rely on your memory, because we all do. But the only way that that is possible is if God exists, if God is the very precondition for those things. So if God didn't exist, that wouldn't have applied. And so it's in the same way that if I was to breathe oxygen, and then I came to you, Nautic, and I said, oxygen doesn't exist. You'd be like, what are you talking about? You're foolish. You're breathing oxygen while denying oxygen. It's in the same way you're living your life as though God does exist, but denying the existence of God. Look, at the end, God says He's going to render to each according to our works. That we're still going to die and we're still going to face Him on Judgment Day. Whether it is for the sin of abortion, whether it is lying, whether it's unbelief.
What organization are you guys belonging to?
Well, we're out here. We're a Christian organization in the sense that we're just brothers and sisters from different churches coming together to share the gospel, to speak out against the evil of abortion, and to call people to repentance. Because all men have a knowledge of God. They suppress that truth, and instead they indulge in their sin. And God says, one day, I'm going to hold you guys accountable to your crimes.
Right.
So just like yourself, that God exists, not that you profess that God exists, but that even if you did acknowledge that God exists, you wouldn't bow your knee. Because there isn't any evidence, enough evidence, sufficient evidence that would get you to bow your knee and worship God. Was that correct? Like you said, even if there is a God, you wouldn't believe in Him. Yeah. And then that's what it essentially comes down to. It's an issue of a sinful heart, a heart that hates God, and one that God will hold us accountable with. But God is also offering forgiveness to reconcile you to Him, that although you are guilty, He can make you innocent because He has sent His Son to pay the price. For all those who believe and turn to Him, they shall not perish but have everlasting life. That is the good news. That makes sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Nice talking.
It was a pleasure.
Take care.
Enjoy.